The security guard's name tag said Felix, and he had been working the front desk of First Fidelity Savings Bank on Liberation Avenue in Accra, Ghana, for 9 years. And in those 9 years, he had never once been asked to remove an elderly woman from a chair until the morning of the 14th of March at 10:07 a.m., when the branch manager told him to do exactly that. The old woman had been sitting in the chair beside the customer service desk for 41 minutes. She was small, not more than 5 feet, 2 inches, and she wore a black dress with small white flowers printed on it, and a pair of brown church shoes that had been polished until they reflected the fluorescent light above her. Beside her on the tile floor sat a black vinyl handbag the size of a Bible, and inside that handbag, folded 4 times into a square no larger than a playing card, was a document that every person in that building would have behaved very differently around had they known it existed. She was 74 years old, and she was blind in both eyes, and she could not read the document herself, but she had carried it for 6 years, and she knew by touch which fold to open first. Felix took 2 steps toward her, and then stopped. The branch manager, a man named Mr. Tovena Osei, who wore a lanyard with his photograph on it, and who had been at First Fidelity for 11 years, was watching from the doorway of his office. 2 customers at the counter looked up. One of them, a young man in a yellow shirt, reached into his pocket for his phone. The woman's name was Nana Ama Mensa Owusu Boateng. She had come to this bank 4 times in 3 months. She did not yet know that a helicopter had lifted off from Kotoka International Airport 43 minutes ago and was now moving over the rooftops of Accra toward a building less than 600 meters from where she was sitting. But the person in that helicopter already knew where she was. Nana Ama had grown up in Kumasi, the second of 5 children, born to a woman who sold yams from a wooden table on Kijeria Road every morning from 4:30 until the yams ran out, and to a man who repaired shoes in a wooden stall 3 streets away, who died of malaria in 1974 when Nana Ama was 23, and who left behind, in a Team Biscuit box under the floor of the stall, the exact sum of 4,200 cedis, the savings of a man who had never once spent money on himself that could instead be spent on his children. She was 61 years old and a widow, and her eyes had been failing for 7 years by the time the doctors at Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital told her. On a Thursday afternoon, in a room that smelled of disinfectant and something like talcum powder, that the glaucoma had advanced past the point where surgery would restore anything. She had nodded. She had thanked the doctor by name. She had stood up carefully, taken her black vinyl handbag from the chair beside her, and walked out into the corridor and sat down on a bench outside the door and folded her hands in her lap and stayed very still for 16 minutes. The nurse, who had been watching from the corridor, said later that the old woman had not cried. She had simply sat there with her hands folded as though she were waiting for a bus. Until a man in a white coat, who was not her doctor, crouched down beside her and said, "Mama, is there someone I should call for you?" Nana Ama had said, "My son will come. He always comes." She had been wearing on the day of that appointment a dress she had sewn herself, green and gold kente print cotton, cut the way her mother had taught her, with a hem that cleared the floor by exactly 1.5 inches. She had been sewing her own clothes since she was 11 years old. The black dress with white flowers she wore to the bank on March 14th was one she had sewn 3 years before the blindness took her other eye. Guided by her hands and by 40 years of muscle memory, the seams as straight as any machine could make them. Erson's name was Kofi Owusu Boateng. He was 41 years old, and he had left Ghana for the United Kingdom on a partial scholarship to study civil engineering at the University of Edinburgh when he was 22, and had returned 9 years later, not as the man who had left, but as something his mother had never once asked him to become, and had always known he would. She had not needed her eyes to see that. She had known it the way she knew the straightness of a seam, by touch, by years, by the particular quality of a person's stillness when they are thinking about something larger than what is in front of them. He had built 3 things in the 20 years since his return: a civil engineering firm called Obi Infrastructure, headquartered in Airport City, Accra, that employed 214 people and had projects across 6 West African countries; a foundation called the Mensa Owusu Boateng Foundation, named for his mother and his late father, that had built 11 schools and 4 health clinics in rural communities in the Ashanti and Brong-Ahafo regions, and a modest house on a quiet street in cantonments. On the other side of the city from his office, where his mother had a room with a window that faced the garden, and where every morning at 6:15 a.m., when he was in Accra, he brought her tea without being asked. Nana Ama had come to First Fidelity Savings Bank on Liberation Avenue because it was the branch where she had held her account for 31 years, and because her account had been frozen. The account had been frozen on the 28th of February by order of a form signed by the branch manager, Mr. Tobena Ose, following what the bank's internal records described as a routine verification query flagged by the bank's fraud detection system. The system had been upgraded in January. One of its new parameters flagged accounts with no digital transaction history, no mobile banking, no card use, no online transfers, as potentially dormant or compromised. Nana Ama's account had 31 years of handwritten passbook entries and no digital footprint at all. The amount frozen was 47,800 Ghana cedis. It was not a large sum by the standards of the bank's premium clients. It was the entirety of what Nana Ama had. She had come in on the 18th of February, 2 weeks before the freeze, to make a withdrawal. The teller, a young woman named Blessing, whose name tag she could not read. Odd looked at the passbook, then at the dress, then at the black vinyl handbag, and had said, with the particular politeness that is a form of dismissal, that the system was showing a flag on the account and that she would need to speak with customer service. Customer service had referred her to the branch manager. The branch manager had been in a meeting. She had waited for 40 minutes and been told he was unavailable and that she should return the following week. She had returned on the 25th of February. Mr. Tovena Ose had received her this time for 9 minutes, during which he had explained in the measured language of a man reciting a policy that the verification process was standard procedure, that it was for her protection, and that she would need to provide a government-issued identification, a recent utility bill, and a completed KYC update form, which she would need to fill in herself or have a representative fill in on her behalf. Nana Ama had said quietly that she was blind and lived alone, and that she had held this account since 1993, and that the money in it was her life savings, and that she needed to pay a medical bill of 3,200 cedis by the 1st of March. Mr. Osei had said that he was sorry for the inconvenience and that the process existed to protect all customers. She had gone home. She had called Kofi. He had been in Abidjan for a project. He had told her he would handle it as soon as he was back, which would be the 10th of March. He had called the bank's head office from Abidjan. He had been told the matter would be resolved at branch level. He had called 3 more times in the following 4 days. Each time he had been told the matter was being reviewed. On March 14th, Nana Ama had come back. She had brought the document this time. She had asked her neighbor, a retired school teacher named Constance Achebi, to walk with her as far as the taxi rank on Kanda Highway and to read her the document aloud one final time before she put it back in her bag. Constance had read it and then folded it carefully back into its 4 folds and pressed it into Nana Ama's hand and said, "You carry that in. Don't show it to the small people. Show it to whoever thinks they are in charge." She had been sitting in the chair for 41 minutes when Felix came. The banking hall of First Fidelity on Liberation Avenue was a room of pale marble tiles and recessed lighting and 4 counters with frosted glass panels. It smelled of air conditioning and the faint ghost of someone's hand sanitizer. There were 8 customers in the hall when Felix took the 3 steps toward Nana Ama's chair. One of them, an older man in a dark suit near the ATM, put down the paper he was reading. 2 women at counter 3 turned around. The young man in the yellow shirt had his phone up. Felix reached the chair and crouched down to her level and said, as quietly as he could, "Madam, please." The manager says, she said, "I am not going." Not with anger, not loudly, with the composure of a woman who had decided before she sat down that she was not going to move from this chair, and who had the particular stillness of someone who has already made peace with every consequence of that decision. Felix straightened up. He looked at Mr. Osei in the doorway. Mr. Osei made a small gesture with 2 fingers, the kind of gesture a man makes when he means do it properly. Felix crouched back down. "Madam, you are causing a disturbance." "I am sitting," she said. Sitting is not a disturbance. Madam, I have held an account in this bank since 1993. 31 years. I have never borrowed. I have never asked for anything except what was mine. My money is in this building, and I am sitting in this chair until someone gives me my money. The older man near the ATM put his paper completely down. The two women at counter 3 were no longer facing the counter. The young man in the yellow shirt was filming. Mr. Osei walked across the marble floor and stood in front of her with his lanyard catching the light. Aside, with the tone of a man performing patience for an audience, "Madam, I understand your frustration. But the bank has procedures. If you cannot complete the verification requirements, I cannot release the funds. This is not something I have discretion over." Nana Ama turned her face toward the sound of his voice. Her eyes were open and still, the particular stillness of eyes that have stopped tracking the world, but have not closed against it. "Who is your supervisor?" she said. "I am the branch manager." "Then who is your supervisor's supervisor?" A pause. "That would be the regional director. Call him." Mr. Osei said that was not how the process worked. He said it in 2 more sentences than he needed. He said that she was welcome to lodge a formal complaint through the customer service channel. She said she had lodged 3 complaints through the customer service channel in the past 3 weeks, and that not one of them had received a response. Aside, the response time was 5 to 7 business days. She said it had been 14. He looked at Felix. Felix looked at the young man filming. And then, from outside, beyond the glass front of the bank, came a sound that was not a car and not a bus, and not the Liberation Avenue traffic. A low, rhythmic percussion of rotor blades that had been growing for 40 seconds without anyone inside the building noticing. If you can feel where this is going, stay with me. Because what steps out of that helicopter in the next few minutes is something Mr. Tobena Osei will be telling people about for the rest of his career. Not proudly. There was a woman who sold Coes and Coes from a metal tray on the pavement outside First Fidelity, every morning from 8 until the tray was empty. Her name was Abena, and she was 67 years old, and she had been on that pavement for 19 years, and she knew the comings and goings of Liberation Avenue the way a river knows its banks. She had been watching through the glass since Nana Ama sat down. She had seen Felix walk over twice. She had seen Mr. Osei's 2-fingered gesture. She had said nothing and done nothing, because she had learned long before that the kind of help that looks like interference makes things worse for the person you are trying to help. But she had made one phone call. At 9:51 a.m., 16 minutes after Nana Ama sat down, Abena had dialed a number she had saved under the name K.O., a number given to her 4 years ago by the old woman herself. On a morning when Nana Ama had stopped at her tray on the way to a different errand, and they had talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. The way 2 women of a certain age will talk when they recognize in each other a person who has survived things quietly. She had said to him, "Your mother is sitting in that bank, and they are treating her like she is something to be moved." Kofi Osu Boateng had been in a side meeting in Tema at 9:51 a.m. He had ended the meeting at 9:52. He was at Kotoka International Airport at 10:03, where a charter helicopter used for site visits to coastal projects was on the pad. The helicopter lifted at 10:04. It was a 12-minute flight. The rotor sound reached the banking hall at 10:46, then lowered, then stopped. Mr. Osei heard it first. He went to the window. The helicopter had set down in the open lot behind a filling station adjacent to the bank, a flat stretch of concrete, wide enough, barely, for the rotors. The door opened. A man got out in a white shirt and dark trousers. No tie, with the unhurried walk of someone who has nowhere else to be and is not interested in being anywhere else. It pushed through the glass door of the bank at 10:48 a.m., and the first thing he did was not speak to Mr. Osei and not look at Felix and not scan the room for the manager's office. It walked directly to the chair where his mother was sitting and crouched down in front of her the way Felix had, but differently. The way a person crouches when they are not trying to move someone but trying to be level with them. "Mama?" he said. She put her hand on the side of his face. "I told you he would come," she said. And it took a moment for the people watching to understand she was not talking to Kofi. She was talking to the room. Kofi stood up. He was not tall, not more than 5'11", and he did not raise his voice, and he was not wearing anything that announced itself. It turned to face Mr. Tobena Osei. "How long has my mother's account been frozen?" Mr. Osei began to explain the verification procedure, the fraud detection system, the timeline for resolution, the standard process. How long? 14 days, Mr. Osei said. She came in 3 times. Yes. But the requirements? She is 74 years old and blind, and she came to this building 3 times in 3 weeks to retrieve money that belongs to her. He did not say this with heat. He cited the way a person states a measurement, exactly and without decoration. Her account number is 0047 2281993. It has been active since November 1993. The average monthly balance for the past 8 years is 44,000 cedis. There has never been a missed statement. There has never been a withdrawal that exceeded the deposited amount. There is no legitimate basis for this freeze. Mr. Osei sighed. The system flagged. The system flagged the absence of digital banking on a 74-year-old woman's account. Kofi Owusu Boateng put his hand in the inside pocket of his jacket and set a business card on the counter beside him, face up. He did not look at it. My name is Kofi Owusu Boateng. I am the primary donor to the First Fidelity Community Development Partnership, which is a 3-year agreement your head office signed in January of this year. I have your regional director's mobile number in my phone, and I will call it in the next 90 seconds if my mother's account is not unfrozen while I am standing in this room. The 2 women at counter 3 had stopped pretending to look at anything else. The older man near the ATM had his paper folded in half on the machine and had not touched it in 4 minutes. Felix was standing very still near the wall, his hands at his sides, and his face had the look of a man who is quietly grateful he had not finished what he started. Mr. Osei reached for his phone. He did not call the regional director. He called the systems manager. He spoke for 45 seconds. He set the phone down on his desk. The account will be active in 4 to 5 minutes, he said. Thank you, Kofi said. And then, I would also like the names of the 3 complaint submissions my mother filed over the past 14 days and the reason each one was unresolved. Mr. Osei's hand was resting on the desk. The fingers did not move, but the knuckles went slightly white. I will have to check the. I will wait. The account was active again by 11:03 a.m. The teller who processed the transaction, a different one this time, a young man whose hands were slightly unsteady, asked Nana Ama if she would like her balance read to her. She said yes. He read it. She thanked him by name. Kofi stayed for 22 minutes after the account was restored. He sat with his mother in the 2 chairs beside the customer service desk while she counted by touch the withdrawal she had come for. 3,200 cedis, the medical bill, and then folded the notes with the precision of a woman who has been handling money carefully her entire life. Then she pressed a folded square of paper from her black vinyl handbag into his hand and asked him to read it to her, even though they both knew she had it memorized. He unfolded it. It was a notarized letter from a law firm in Accra, dated 2018, confirming that Nana Ama Mensa Owusu Boateng was the named beneficiary and co-signatory on a property deed for a building on Independence Avenue, a building she had been the co-owner of for 6 years, without ever having used that information to make a single thing easier for herself. She had carried it because her late husband had told her to carry it, and because she had long ago made a decision that she did not want to be a woman whose life was propped up by documents. She wanted to be a woman whose life could stand on its own. She had brought it today because she had decided that if they tried to remove her from that chair, she was going to set it on the desk and let them read it for themselves. She had not needed to, but she had wanted to have it ready. Kofi folded it back into its 4 folds and put it carefully in her handbag. Outside, through the glass front of the bank, Abena had sold out her tray and was packing it up with the unhurried efficiency of a woman who has somewhere to be next. At the door, the young man in the yellow shirt had put his phone away. As Kofi and his mother stood to leave, the older man near the ATM picked up his paper again. He had not read a word of it in 40 minutes. 3 weeks later, First Fidelity Savings Bank circulated an internal policy update to all 17 of its branches, authored by the regional director and countersigned by the head of compliance. The update suspended the use of the digital activity parameter as a standalone basis for account freezes. It required that any freeze affecting an account older than 10 years, with no prior irregularities, be personally approved by the regional director before implementation. not after. It established a 48-hour maximum response time for all customer complaints. The update was the result of a meeting between the regional director and Kofi Ousu Boateng that had taken place at the OB Infrastructure offices in Airport City on March 22nd, 8 days after the morning on Liberation Avenue. The meeting had been requested by the bank. On a Thursday morning in late April, Abena was at her tray on the pavement outside First Fidelity when Nana Ama came past, not to go inside, just past, on her way to an errand, and stopped and asked for 2 pieces of coals. Abena wrapped them in a piece of paper and put them in her hand and refused the money. Nana Ama stood there for a moment. "You called him," she said. Abena said, "You knew I would." Nana Ama said, "I was counting on it." And she smiled, not broadly, not for show. The small, particular smile of a woman who had planned for every outcome and had simply been waiting for the rest of the world to arrive at the one she already knew. Mr. Tobena Osai believed, on the morning of March 14th, that he was managing a minor branch disruption, an elderly woman who did not understand procedure, a situación to be resolved efficiently and moved past. It was not thinking about who she was. It was thinking about what she looked like and what she could not do, and how easily the situation could be concluded if the right pressure was applied. He had not thought about who she had raised. And that is the lesson that sits at the center of this story. Not the helicopter, not the business card, not the property deed folded 4 times in a black vinyl handbag. The lesson is this: a person who has poured every year of their life into raising someone of quality has not done a small thing. They have done the largest thing. They have placed their hands on the future and shaped it. And that shaping does not go away when the body gets old and the eyes go dark. It lives in the person they raised. It walks back through the door. You can dismiss the woman in the church shoes. You can measure her by her handbag and her dress and the number she cannot see on a screen. You can mistake stillness for surrender and silence for weakness. But you cannot undo what she already built. You cannot unraise the sun. You cannot unplant the tree because you have decided you do not believe in the fruit. The world is full of people sitting in chairs they are not supposed to sit in, holding documents the room hasn't thought to ask about, waiting for the rest of the story to arrive. They are not waiting to be rescued. They are waiting for the world to catch up. Nana Ama knew her son would come. She had always known. She had raised him to come. That is not faith in luck. That is the compound interest of a life well spent on something that matters. It is the question I want to leave with you today. Think about the person in your life, your mother, your grandmother, an elder you know, who gave everything they had quietly, without announcement, without keeping score. If that person walked into a room today and the room didn't recognize what they were, didn't know what they'd built or who they'd raised or what they carried, would you want to be the one who stood up? Or would you be the one who looked away? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.